Shing, are we recording? Okay, I see you recording.
Started, yeah.
All right. So, good morning, everyone. So first, I want to go over where we are in terms of our milestones, and then quickly jump into technical discussion. So, for the last week or so, we started discussing the status of the demo that we promised to show. And other than that, the other priority that we have is the API review. So I'll first discuss the progress on these two tasks, and we'll go from there. For the demo, we said we'll have development done for the basic use case of creating a bucket, granting access for that bucket to a pod, and provisioning that bucket into a pod. So that was supposed to be the development milestone. So I'm happy to say we have that in place. There was one thing that was pending as of last week, which was having a parameters field inside of the gRPC spec for the protocol. Well, for things other than the protocol. So earlier we had in the gRPC spec, we had in the bucket create request, we had the bucket name, we had the access mode, and a generic map string called bucket context. This generic field was supposed to hold both protocol specific information and driver specific information. However, that can easily lead to conflicts and undefined behavior. And it goes against our idea of having protocol be a strongly typed structure. So we decided that we will have a protocol as a separate typed field in the gRPC create bucket request structure. And we'll have a separate parameters generic map string field for driver specific parameters. Both of them would come from the bucket class. So we made this change in the spec repository, and it's under review right now. So let us actually quickly see what the progress of it right now. So let's go there. I believe Saad left some comments yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, so there it is. Interesting.
Yeah. Actually, the major item to take away is Saad wants an identity interface, just like CSI for the provisioner get info. To split that out, right?
Oh, so he wants to, I see, get provisional info. I see. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a simple change.
But the interface will only have one method though.
True. I mean, it's just like CSI. I think he's trying to separate the concerns. Yeah. So everything IO related, creating provisioning related goes into the provisioner service. Right. And identity of the driver itself is a separate concern.
Correct.
This should be easy to implement. College should treat these as opaque, receive responsible parsing and validating.
But that would change the spec.md also, so we have to do that way. And then there is another concern that he says that .proto should be generated rather than...
Yeah, that's easy.
So we can follow what CSI is doing in that regard too. So those are the two major items I take away from this.
I see. So he probably just greps from the spec.md. And it's a good idea to do that because that'll ensure that spec.md and this are always in sync. It's a really good idea, I think. Expand the comment for bucket name to explain purpose. Okay, fair enough. Be consistent with other comments. Yes. What is S3 signature version? How is it different from string version below? Yep. Question, wrap these in one off. There's a problem with that. Oh yeah, we can do that now since
Just a
we're
minor,
defining it
yeah.
twice. Shouldn't this return a bucket struct which at a minimum should contain string bucket ID? Well, bucket name is the unique identifier. Should not be input anywhere other than create bucket. The create bucket call should return a string bucket ID. Now subsequent calls should only operate on string bucket ID, not string bucket name. I mean, bucket name is unique. So bucket name is the bucket ID. There is no, like in S3, there's no such thing as bucket ID.
So in CSI, the concept was that the name, which is the input to the create, is like an idempotency string, which you know, if you get two requests with the same name, you know the second one is a retry of the first, not a request for a new bucket. But you can totally ignore the name and generate your own ID if you want to, or you can return it back as the ID. The important thing is, if you want to make all the other calls be based on the ID, so that if a provisioner for whatever reason wants to generate its own IDs with more information than just the name, or with a tie-in to some other database, then you force the CO to send back that ID that the provisioner chose, or that the plugin chose. And if the plugin just reuses the name as the ID, then it degenerates into what you're talking about, where it's always the name. But it gives plugins the freedom to do something else. And if you don't always pass in the ID instead of the name, then that freedom is sort of worthless, because you just have to remember the name anyways. So the whole point is plugins
Name is globally unique. Name is globally unique, so there is no need to have a separate ID on any provider because they have to be DNS addressable. So
right, but there's a question of statefulness. So even if the name is unique, if the plugin has to mangle it somehow, or mangle is the wrong way. If the plugin has to generate another ID internally and then store the mapping, and then you only come back later with just the name, then the plugin has to have access to that mapping to basically reverse map it back to find the ID that it chose later on. And that puts a statefulness requirement on the plugin to basically remember its mapping.
So I think, why do we even need a mapping in the first place? The name is the ID. Everything is accessible by name.
We don't know how plugins are implemented, right? There could be a plugin that, you know, identifies buckets with integers instead of UUIDs, and they're just monotonically increasing integers, and so every bucket just gets another number. And like,
no,
and
I'm saying the name itself is the ID. It's always unique.
Is this guaranteed for all object storage though? Because
all objects, all public cloud providers do it. Menayo does it. Cloudian does it.
So I mean, you're probably right that it's not a substantive restriction to just force the ID and the name to be the same, but like, it's more flexible to let them not be the same, and that was the decision that was made on the CSI side.
I think it's part. I think it is different though. Object storage and like blog and file are pretty different.
Right. Yeah.
This is also not an object. This is like a bucket. Right? It's not like object names, bucket name.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it would. I don't think it would be a problem to force them to be the same, but like, it also doesn't cost us anything to just let them be different, and then that gives another degree of flexibility to plugin authors.
But is that? I mean, is that necessary?
Right. And we're not forcing it, but because it's like the Kubernetes API. The unique ID is the name.
At the Kubernetes API level, but like at the CSI layer, the name is not what is used, it's the ID that's used.
Right, but
so Kubernetes has to store the ID and maintain the mapping on its side. And so I don't know, like I can't think of a specific example here where it would definitely help a plugin, but it's just it doesn't cost anything to allow them to be different.
It's really not needed, right? I mean, buckets are different from like a volume, right?
Well, to understand, do we have to consider that for the sake of topology by any means? Like, you know, I
For
did
the
the
sa-
map.
That's still the same bucket, isn't it?
yeah. So I think what Srini is asking is there a chance that you can have in different topologies a bucket by the same name? If you did have a bucket by the same name, how would you be able to differentiate them as a workload? Couldn't, right?
Well, what about two different workloads in two different Kubernetes clusters?
Yeah, if they're two different Kubernetes clusters, again, the unique bucket name is what was used to address it.
If they're sharing the same bucket, then that should still be the same bucket name, isn't it?
The question
Even if
is
the
like
two Kubernetes class, I mean, this is like the bucket name on the Rails object storage backend, right? So
yeah,
if you have two Kubernetes classes sharing it, this bucket name should be the same, I think. Well, I have only used S3, so that's I don't know about the behavior of other object storage.
Like in Google Cloud, Azure, and in S3, Alibaba Cloud is the one that I haven't used. But in all three, they're globally unique. Bucket names are globally unique.
I think this is different. I don't think this is the same as like a volume. Maybe object would be a little different than that. I don't know. But
right.
We can't, I don't think, compare
so
bucket with the volume.
I think you have to be very careful about the claim that it's globally unique, because how do you enforce that it's really globally unique? Like someone can very easily set up a clone environment where all the DNS names are the same, all the IP addresses are the same, all the everything is the same, and then generate two different buckets with the same name, and like they won't be the same, but they'll appear to be the same in every respect that seems to matter.
But if they're in two different environment, then the
but if they have access to the same object store for whatever reason.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So I don't think there's any reason that's completely unsolvable. That is a unique situation. Let's say that extreme situation is being built up. So the easiest the easiest thing one can do is have two separate drivers for the two environments, and one driver would the unique names that it generates would talk to the local cluster, and the other one would talk to the global one, which is possibly, local might be in IO and global might be S3 itself.
I'm suggesting that if you have two environments like this and they're in two instances of the driver and they're pointed at the same actual object store, and they try to create buckets that are not the same but have the same name because there's no way to prevent them from being the same.
Let me put it this way. An application addresses a bucket uniquely by its name.
But that name is only unique within the Kubernetes cluster. That's the only guarantee
name is unique with the object storage provider. That's, application is not talking to the Kubernetes cluster.
But if the application requests the Kubernetes cluster provision the bucket, so it's like I don't have anything in mind. I want a bucket.
Right, exactly. So I think we end up overcomplicating it and over-engineering by forcing a bucket ID here when there is no need for it.
It easily could be over-engineering, but
right, that's what I'm
small
saying.
Cost and I don't
know. It's not
My
small cost.
suspicion is if we don't do it, we'll regret it later.
Well, I don't think so. I don't think so, because changing from bucket name to bucket ID is simple. But before even needing it, adding a bucket ID, you add complexity, because now you have two different things you address something by. So
this is alpha, right? So if we find it, we can change. And you probably also want to check with SAD, because SAD also has this comment. See, so
we'll check with SAD, obviously. Of course, everyone should be in agreement before we move forward with this.
Yeah, I think to me it should be sufficient just to use the bucket name based on my limited experience with object storage. But I think bucket is very different from the volume. I can see. So
I think I know where Saad is coming from. Saad is coming from the idea that he's seen this problem in CSI and he's trying to avoid it. But I think if we just let him know that in object storage, that is not an issue, then it should be fine. Now, let us say that it does become an issue. It is not at all a big deal to add a new field, but removing a field is impossible.
Well, if it's alpha, actually, you can change it. I think we should sort this out before we move to beta.
Oh
right?
yeah, we should sort this out. Agreed. Yeah. But we'll know more as we also start implementing. I think it is a little early to come up with a use case for a design choice that was made first. It's like we have a design choice first and then we're coming up with a use case. That's the wrong way to do it. We should do it the other way, where the use case is very clear, and as a response to that, we add such a field. What do you think?
So I just wanted to point out that if we do go down the path of the name is the identifier, then that puts an onus on the CO to ensure that that name is not only unique within that CO, but unique with anything else that could be using the same object storage, which is just, it's a bigger requirement.
That's any application that's trying to do that already needs that invariant to be satisfied.
Yeah, but so let me just give you an example of like the requirement it puts on the CO. So like if I created a PVC and I name it test, and if the behavior of Kubernetes was that it just took the name of my PVC and used it as the name of the volume and sent it down to the CSI layer, test was the name of the volume, then I would pop a a volume, but it would have a unique ID associated with it. And then later when I would go back to refer to that volume, I would use the unique ID. And then if anyone else creates a volume called test, they would get they would get the same volume unless
they wouldn't be able to create it.
Well, no. What would happen is if the sidecar was just reusing the PVC name and another user created the same volume, the CSI driver would interpret that as a retry of an old create call, right? Because it would say, oh, I already have tests, success, or if the parameters didn't match, it would say, error conflict. But if they did match, it would just say, yeah, I already created that, which is how idempotency works, right? So Kubernetes has to mangle the names that it sends down in order to avoid that problem. But Kubernetes still only has to make sure that the names that it sends down are unique within that Kubernetes cluster. It doesn't have to worry that the names it creates could conflict with.
No, it's the same. No, it's not true. You have to ensure that the IDs are global. I don't think we're solving a problem by adding that complexity onto ourselves.
The IDs have to be global within that particular CSI driver installation, because that idempotency string is only for.
Couldn't we say that for names too?
But if there's multiple instances of the CSI driver that are talking to a common storage backend, they can, like, different instances of the CSI driver can actually get the same name, and because it's a different instance of it, they know it's a different request, and they can map that to a different volume ID.
The name and the ID need to have similar properties. I don't think, again, there is enough justification to add a new field, given the extra complexity it's adding to be addressing something by two different names.
I'll stop arguing and let Saad take up the argument if he wants to.
Yeah,
because I basically agree. I just have this uneasy feeling.
Fair enough, and I trust your gut instinct as well. But I want a stronger argument. I'm open to listening. Yeah. So let's have this conversation, Saad, as well. I would ideally like to have it when everyone's present. So let us try to have it on Monday. Does deletion really require opaque parameters? Good point. Srini or Rob, are you on the call?
Rob is not here, but I don't know much about, but there could be certain criteria when you do delete, like, that we want to send to the backend, like, archive, or I don't know.
That would be a separate operation though, right? I mean, any operation related to bucket management, we should be explicit about it, don't you think?
The driver, for the driver, right? I mean, driver has to do some kind of backend setup, then that will be passed through these parameters. And driver will understand. I'm guessing. I mean,
probably like secrets or something. Well, if it is secrets, I would like to pass the secrets as an explicit secret field.
No, not secrets. Like, delete the volume after, all this cleanup, or, after a week or something like that. Or
that's a good point. Yeah, that's something that one of our customers is doing, where if no objects are accessed within 7 days or so, or whenever a delete is called, the thing is left alone for seven days before it actually deletes, and that's configurable. But again, it doesn't have to be an opaque parameter, correct?
Well, configurable on the backend side, but if we are managing the bucket from here, is a way to tell the driver that do this before you can issue a delete call, right?
Yeah. So the question is, should it be opaque or should it be a typed field? I prefer having a typed field.
Also, does it need to be per bucket, right? Because this is a per bucket option. The option you're describing could be a global option that you just set for all buckets. I have this policy.
Well, no, it's generally per bucket.
Okay.
Yeah, bucket lifecycle.
It could have been specified at create time and then stored with the bucket.
Right. True. That too. Yeah. I mean, if anything, I think if there is something that is decided on the fly rather than something that can be stored on the bucket, even in that case, I don't think it should be opaque.
And I don't think you need anything at delete time, because like this specific use case could just be like a mutation option or a creation time option that you just set, and then the bucket remembers that it has this policy.
Right. Yeah. So in that case, I think we should remove the parameters from delete. What do you think, Srini and others too?
Well, I was going to point out that in the CSI spec, one of the things that's not so obvious is that deletion is especially complicated because it may be called in a situation where the CO is like recovering from an error and it doesn't have any state. And like the CO is only interested in cleaning up at that point. So like
I see.
Deletion needs to have particularly light requirements on what the CO has to provide for it to succeed, because it might be called in an error situation where you're just trying to clean up.
I mean, the way around it would be to, in case of CSI, just thinking about it, couldn't we just store the deletion request with its parameters in the object itself that we want to delete?
I don't understand what you mean. I mean, it seems like a implementation specific question.
Yeah, it is implementation specific. Yeah, never mind. I don't think it's worth getting into that right now anyway. So I see what you mean. And yeah, we will be light on the deletion request here. I vote that, we don't have parameters here. We don't have a field at all here. Rather just the unique identifier for the bucket, which will be either the name or the ID based on what we decide.
100% clear. I mean, we have to look at the APIs for different providers and see if there is anything that the additional parameters we want to take that's implementation specific, then this is the only mechanism for us to
it's not like you could require that those parameters are specified at some earlier time, and that the cozy driver remembers them and then supplies them at delete time. If the underlying API requires that, it becomes the cozy driver's problem
to at a global level, right?
Well, no, what he means is, so when creating the bucket, and if you're setting some bucket lifecycle rules, you set it up while creating or after creating. Well, always after creating, but as a part of cozy, we could send both at once, and we can ask the CO to do one after the other. However, during delete, there isn't really any thing you can pass in. I know this in case of S3 and MinIO. I'll have to look into it for Azure and GCS. But just logically thinking, I think there are no fields that you can really pass through for delete. I think Saad caught on to a good thing here.
Yeah, all I'm saying is, let's do a little bit more research on the three providers.
I think that's fair. So yeah, so I want to move this along fast. So so who do we have here? So Krish has been looking into different clouds for us. Anytime some parameter or some call has to be looked at across different providers. Krish, are you there?
Yep.
So did you get what we were just talking about?
I think I missed the last bit.
Okay. So the conversation was around passing parameters during bucket deletion.
Mm-hmm.
So we are not sure at this point if across all providers deletion requires or deletion supports any sort of extra parameters that change the behavior of the deletion itself. That's the first question. The second question is, are those parameters something that can be configured on the bucket outside of the delete operation itself?
Mm-hmm.
So if you could look into that for the three major cloud providers, that is AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure, and let us know what it is. That would be good. We just need to make sure that delete does not require, or it does require, extra parameters or not.
Okay, yeah, I'll look into that.
Thank you. Okay, so that will be resolved based on what Krish finds out. Okay, those are the list of questions. So the two open questions that we have are about bucket ID and deletion, right? Yeah, looks like it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let us follow up on this based on the discussion we just had. Let me go back here. All right. So continuing. So as of since we had made that pull request, I was considering deletion. Development. More or less done status. However, based on the responses from Saad, I would put development in still in progress. So the next step is a deployment, full stack deployment. So we've got this down. Right now, anyone can go and set up and try out Cozy using these 4 commands. The command is kubectl create -k. The K stands for customize, and you just give the name of the repository that you want to deploy. You can't specify it as sigs.kts.io. Customize doesn't support canonical URLs, vanity URLs like that. It only supports using full GitHub paths. So you just specify the name of the project, and kubectl create -k, name of the project, should deploy it for you. We've already set up the customized files the right way, the RBAC rules for it, and it should just work. The next step is, so I would consider full stack deployment in a good state, and for the sake of this demo, I would consider it done. Testing. So we have unit tests and CI in place. However, E2E tests are still not in place. Also, I think manual E2E testing is also required. So testing is something in progress. Before the demo, I think it's reasonable if we perform manual E2E testing, because it looks like it is not completely in our control to get the actual E2E tests in place. It looks like we'll need to get some hardware allocated for this purpose, and the amount of time that it takes is a little long for that. So I want to bring up that that one change, and then say that in case of E2E tests, we want to keep it manual for now. Documentation, we have getting started and spec guides, but when I was looking through the documentation that we had in place, so this, hold on. So in the getting started guide, let's talk about that first. So the getting started guide, we have it in place for pretty much all of the repositories, but then it is made as if, it's made with HTML tags in it in a markdown file. So the formatting has to be changed. That's the one step that's required. So some minor changes are required in the getting started guide. And the spec guide, there's a pull request out there for it to be reviewed and merged in the spec repository. Am I right, Srini, about that? I believe you were working on the spec guide.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So has someone responded to it? Or are you waiting for someone?
No, I think I'm good. I asked Shin to review it, and that's like we discussed, right? I have done half of it. There is a lot more to do in that spec guide, but that part Jeff has done review, and I addressed all his comments. So just have to.
Okay. So Srini, given that Saad wanted us to generate the cozy.proto from the spec.md, so spec would still need some changes, right, before showing reviews?
I'm
assuming we want to do that.
Yeah, that I probably will do in the second. It's an iterative process. I'm doing bits and pieces of documentation.
So right now, the one that you post right now does not build, does not generate the code yet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
That was actually I was going to ask you. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to do it iteratively. First sections seem to be pretty solid. I'm just following the CSI kind of structure in terms of sections in the document. So I'll add that.
Yeah. So Shing, I think he's saying we should go ahead and merge this if the docs themselves look good, and then he'll do a second PR that will make the spec be something that we can generate from. Right, Srini?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, I think it's good if we're reviewing smaller chunks of code.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I just started looking at that.
Okay. So, any questions so far? Okay. All right. Let's go back into deletion and finalizers. We had a good conversation about this last Friday. I want to first bring up the context we had last week, and then some new findings were made about this. So I want to bring that up as well. So I'll actually pause here for a second. Ben, do you want to ask your question now, or do you want to ask after we go through finalizers?
Well, yeah, this is kind of brief. So we are interested in writing a plugin like soon, and I wanted to get a sense of like how much of the first of all, is there a sample plugin that we can like copy and paste from, or how much of the sidecars and everything else and libraries are in a usable form right now to start doing that plugin effort?
I think you can get started right away. Obviously, most of these things are in development. So the reason I still say that you should get started right away is, one, you'll get exposed to the code. I want more people to be exposed to the code.
Oh, I mean, so I'm not saying we will definitely do it. I'm just saying like I'd like to know, like, can we do it so I can start agitating to like get someone to do this work.
Yeah, you should start.
And if they and if someone is willing to do it, like where do we go look for like the actual bits?
Yeah, so the 4 repositories that I had shown here, this is where you go look for the actual bits. I am in the process of writing a doc that details out how to write a driver. It's still a work in progress, but
is there like a hello world driver?
Yeah, we do have a hello world driver. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that actually talks to a real Minayo backend and provisions buckets and grants access and all that. Yeah.
Okay, so it's more than that. It's a open source based functional driver.
Yeah, it is.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'll even quickly show you. Are you on your phone or can you view video?
I don't know if I can see video. I mean, I'm on a computer. I'm not sure what you're about to do.
Okay. I'm just showing you the repository structure and where we have the sample driver and everything. Can you see it now? Can you see the video? Can you see
I can see your screen sharing. If that's
screen share. Sorry, that's what I meant. Anyway, so this is the sidecar repository. Yeah, this is the HTML that I was talking about. We shouldn't have HTML here. Should just use Markdown templating. So under command, we have two separate ones, the sidecar and the sample driver. The sample driver is the server that the provisioner sidecar acts as the client for. The sample driver has to have provisioner get info satisfied, create bucket, delete, grant bucket access, and revoke bucket access.
So the whole thing's 140 lines. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's just 140 lines because it's a very simple driver. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and we've tested it. It works. But we're making changes as we go along too. Like we're changing the spec. If we move the get info to identity, it's going to look a little different. So stuff like that has to be.
Not only that, I mean, create bucket is also going to change, right? I mean, with the API change.
Right. But regardless, this is a good place to get started.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for this. Yeah, I'll talk to some people on my team and see if we can actually start work on the.
I think you should.
Driver.
No,
yeah,
I
think we should too, but like, it's not my decision.
No, I understand.
I would do it myself if I didn't have like a bunch of other pots on the fire.
No, I understand that. The reason I say that is I want to encourage more people to start using the system, using what we have, because only then we get feedback on what it's like. So we're in a good shape for people to start working with.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I need to move this again. So the zoom tab at the top prevents me from changing like tabs on my browser window. So I have to move it each time. I have to do something with the tabs on the browser window. Anyways.
You got to learn your browser hotkeys. Hotkeys to change tabs.
The thing is, I've got Emacs keys enabled. So that conflicts with this. Like Emacs bindings for like, I can do Control A, Control E, Control space, copy and all that. Anyway, so if you're not familiar with Emacs, that might not make sense. Okay, so we have 15 minutes. Might not be enough to go over the, actually it might be enough to go over the finalizers. So the proposal I had last week was we would have one finalizer per bucket access on a bucket object. We were worried about having too many finalizers in place. And also in case of the bucket access object, we said we would have one finalizer per pod that was using the bucket access object. So again, for each pod, if we add a finalizer, there'll be a lot of finalizers. Now, one argument against it was, nothing else in Kubernetes kind of follows that. We had a lot of discussion about if this is a good idea or, the alternate choice, which is to have a single finalizer for all the pods that we're using it, using a bucket access, or a single finalizer for all the bucket access that we're using a bucket, and how it might work. And the only problem with that approach that we discussed was it's harder to implement. Later on, when I was thinking about it, and I think Srini mentioned it, that the finalizer logic for the bucket access, which needs to know which pods are alive and which pods are dead, because it'll have to list the pods. If we went with the second approach, the approach that the other approach, not the one that's on the screen right now, the sidecar, in that case, the provisioner sidecar would have to list all the pods and check to make sure that none of them are using this bucket access. Now,
but just to be clear, like that's a list of an in-memory data structure, not
true. The problem is the access control. The provisioner sidecar runs in a namespace meant for the sidecar, and it is not supposed to have access to anything, any information about the actual workloads or pods that are using the access objects, access tokens. That's where.
But something needs that access.
Well, no. If we have the CSI adapter, simply just, it doesn't need to know even what pod it is. It simply just needs to update the bucket access object that it is currently working with. Right. It can be a dumb CSI adapter with no intelligence about what the driver is or what namespace there is in, none of that. It just needs to go and update the bucket access object for whatever access request it gets. That's enough.
Yeah, like I think on the CSI side, like there's a separate Kubernetes object called like a volume attachment, which represents the linkage between the pod and the volume. And so in order to deal with attachments, you only ever have to look at volume attachment objects. You don't have to look at pods. And so I guess it's less of a security risk,
right,
to allow a controller to see the volume attachments and not the pods. But here we don't have any sort of intermediating object that represents the attachment. Maybe that's an omission that should be fixed. Like maybe there's a security benefit to having a proper Kubernetes object that represents an attachment from a pod to a bucket, and then you can just wait till all those disappear to say, oh yeah, it's safe.
Well, the volume attachment is still it's an implementation detail, even in CSI, because
no, I mean, it's a proper Kubernetes object.
It is. However, a pod or a CSI driver that wants to access the pod still gets information about the pod, where it can go and see the namespace and name of the pod.
But that comes from kubelet, not from any controller.
Right. And in this case too, that's all the information we'll need. We just need that, and we don't even need RBAC to access the pod info itself. We just need the name and namespace of the pod. So
what I was getting at is the scheme that I'm proposing, which is don't allow any new attachments on a deleting pod, and then don't delete. I'm sorry, and when deleting the bucket access, and then don't delete the bucket access until all the pods are gone, would involve some controller somewhere having a watch on the pods so that you could determine when there were no pods accessing that particular bucket access, and then you could really clean it up.
No, not at all, because the CSI driver, which would know when the pod dies immediately, just has to go and remove the bucket access, finalize on the bucket access.
Well, this is your scheme with multiple finalizers. Yeah. I'm saying I'm thinking through the scheme that I proposed with just one finalizer, in which case there would have to be a controller that could go enumerate all the pods, make sure there were none accessing the bucket access, and then remove the finalizer. And you're saying that's a security problem, which is true.
Yeah.
But so I was trying to think of other ways to resolve that security problem.
I see. Yeah, I mean, we have a simpler approach, and I'm leaning towards the simpler approach at this stage, at least, unless we need to engineer it to be a different way. I would always go with the simpler approach.
I'm wondering if we can leverage the CSI driver's notion of like what is attached and what is not attached to know
We are doing it. Oh, you mean for your approach?
Yeah, like could the controller look at the volume attachments that the CSI driver created, or are there even any volume attachments for that particular CSI driver to determine if the bucket has any attachments?
I mean, CSI driver does not by default have access to the volume attachment itself.
Well, the sidecar does. The external attacher sidecar can see the volume attachments because that's what it operates on. And I believe the provisioner can also see the volume attachments because it has to do this. It has to inhibit deletion until there are no more volume attachments. So for CSI drivers, they can see those attachments, and it wouldn't be hard to argue that a cozy driver should also be able to see them for the same reason, so we can safely clean things up, so that we can safely inhibit cleaning up until no one's using it.
You know, this is a CSI driver that we use, and I don't know if we use volume. I mean, it works, so I'm just checking if we have volume attachments. We have volume snapshots, if storage classes, persistent volumes, CSI nodes, CSI. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, we have it. You're right.
Yeah, it's necessary for the external attacher sidecar and the provisioner sidecar. So
yeah, I still think, you know, someone has to do the aggregation to say that for this one finalizer, every workload that was using it is now done. In our case, you don't even need the aggregator.
This
you
need it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm talking. CSI adapter is it going to be a long-term solution or to depend on volume attachments? That's my problem basically. We might have native support. If that is the case, then if that goes away, we will not have this option, right? We still have.
If that evolution were to occur, you might need to change it to a different object, and that could be a new object when you make the change.
But that can happen with even the finalizers, right? Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about an evolution.
Well, no, because there's this weird upgrade step where you have existing workloads and existing attachments when you make the upgrade from the old version of the cozy driver to the new version of the cozy driver. Now the new version has to be backwards compatible with all the existing stuff that the old one created. It can be extraordinarily painful to migrate forward.
Right.
So you don't want to create a situation that's hard to build on top of.
I absolutely agree. So again, I'm leaning towards just having the simpler solution, unless there is a strong argument for or against this or other solutions. I think we should go with the simpler one.
Do we know for sure that there's no limit on the number of finalizers that you can have?
Yeah.
We do know that. So if we end up with like 1,000 finalizers on an object, like that's not going to blow anything up.
So if we, I mean, there is
imagine 1,000 pods sharing a bucket, right? That's very possible.
No. So again, it won't be that simple. So the finalizer on the bucket access. So yeah, they could share a bucket, but you know, unless the 1,000 pods belong to the same pod manager, like the same whatever that is, like a deployment or a daemon set or stateful set or whatever. Unless that's the case, they're not going to have 1,000 finalizers on it.
No, I mean, imagine a situation where you have a large cluster, like 1,000 node cluster, and you're running a very large workload, and you only have one namespace, and you only have one bucket, and you have 1,000 pods running on your 1,000 nodes, and they're all sharing the bucket. Like that's a totally reasonable way to use Kubernetes with object storage.
Right, the 1,000 pods. What I'm trying to say is, if the 1,000 pods all belong to us, the same bucket access, then a bucket access would have 1,000 finalizers. But if you're having say 2 different deployments for the same bucket, you get 2 different bucket accesses, and you're not looking at 1,000 in this case. You're looking at 500 instead.
Why is that the case? Wouldn't you have one BAR that I would create, and then all my pods would point at the BAR, and then one bucket access would pop out of that BAR.
Yeah, but for a different, that's why I call it a pod manager. So say you have a deployment and a stateful set. You want them to be using two different BARs for the same bucket. So
why? I'd like to understand this.
Because they might have different access patterns.
But what if they don't? Like what if I know that like all my pods are doing the same thing, and I want them to all have the same access?
That's fine. I mean, so the one limitation I can think of is the limit on the object size in etcd, and again, I don't think we should worry about that because that's 4 kilobytes, and we're going to have lots of finalizers before we get there.
4 kilobytes is small in terms of if each finalizer includes like the pod's name, then, and a pod name is how long? 20 characters.
Yeah.
You're only going to get about 200 elements in your finalizer list before you hit 4K.
We need to check that limit again, but yeah, that would be the one limit. I don't think, again, I don't think there's a hard limit on how many finalizers you can have. And again, I have to verify that that's I think it's 2 MB. Sorry. Yeah. Let's actually check it out. etcd size limit. Sorry, not for. Oh, no, not the maximum database size of entry. 1.5 MB. Maximum size in a request is 1.5 MB. Yeah, MB. Yeah.
Yeah. So you will actually get this kind of questions in the production readiness review. But of course not for alpha, like for beta, you will get this type of questions.
Right. I think this is a very important question. I'm glad Ben was asking this. Okay. Yeah.
I would also want to make sure that our mechanism for manipulating a list of finalizers is properly atomic, because
absolutely, yeah.
I've run into this issue with manipulating finalizer lists where there is no easy way to just like append an element to a list to the Kubernetes API. You have to patch the whole list.
Yeah.
And two racing patches can they're not going to resolve cleanly.
Right. That's why I don't like to use patches for these things. I would rather use a proper update.
Well, the problem with updates are that they're not very backwards compatible version wise, because if you add a new field to a structure and then someone uses an update to manipulate that structure, like and if one of the new fields was populated by one controller, then another controller performing an update can delete that field because it doesn't have the code to fill in that field, and so the update will just zero out a field that was filled in by another controller.
If you use update, you get those type of like conflicts more often.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's actually.
Well, I'm not talking about conflict. I'm talking about like on version upgrade controllers deleting.
I'm saying that actually merges. I mean, the patch is better than update.
Yeah, I believe patch is better, but it's hard to patch lists of finalizers without creating race condition problems. So that's what I was getting at. I have a proposal for how to do it. Yeah, okay. I think it's possible too. It's just be very careful. That's what I'm saying. Be very careful.
I'll actually sit with you and let's actually discuss that as a part of the next meeting. Then I want to hear how you have done it, or how you what your solution is.
Okay. I mean, I just use JSON patches with the test element in them. In that,
I see.
That seems to. Well, I don't know. I haven't proved to myself that it is race condition proof. It's less bad than the default behavior. Let me put it that way.
I see. Yeah, maybe next week during our call, if you want to prepare for it in any way, that would be cool. But if not, I'll start the discussion. We'll go from there.
Okay.
All right. So we're actually out of time. I think this was very productive today. We will follow up on the changes to the spec PR, the comments to spec PR, and yeah, we can go from there.
Yeah. We also need to update the spec, right? The original spec, or?
Yeah. When I said comments, I mean like respond to it by making changes to the spec, making changes to the README, spec.md, and all that.
Sounds good.
Did you mean cap?
Also updating the cap?
Yeah, I think that's what Srini meant.
That's what I meant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that needs to be done too. Good point.
Because that one actually has a deadline. There's an entry deadline. Right?
5th of February or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, let's make sure we prioritize that then.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, I think the plan is clear. Next week we'll discuss the finalizer patching logic, and before that we'll try and have all the spec changes in place, including KEP. Sounds good?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll talk again on Monday.